Former President Donald Trump's trade war with China, waged primarily through tariffs, was a gamble rooted in a fundamental miscalculation. Trump believed that by imposing steep tariffs on Chinese goods, he could force Beijing to concede to his demands, thereby shrinking the trade deficit and reviving American manufacturing. This approach underestimated the resilience of China's economy and its historical experience with external pressure. China, with a long memory of past humiliations and a deep-seated determination to protect its interests, was not about to back down. The result was a trade war that ultimately hurt American businesses and consumers while failing to achieve its intended objectives. Trump, with his focus on short-term gains and a zero-sum view of international trade, saw China's rise as a threat to American dominance. China viewed the trade war as a bump in the road on its path to becoming a global economic powerhouse. The trade war was not merely an economic dispute, it was a symptom of a much larger geopolitical shift. China's rise is a reality that cannot be ignored, and Trump's tariffs, far from halting this rise, may have only served to accelerate it. To understand why Trump's tariffs were always likely to be ineffective, one must delve into China's past. The 19th century marked a period of profound humiliation for China, known as the Century of Humiliation. The Opium Wars, forced concessions of territory like Hong Kong and Macau, and unequal treaties imposed by European nations left a deep scar on the Chinese psyche. This period instilled in the Chinese leadership a deep aversion to external pressure, and a determination to never again be subjected to such exploitation. The Chinese Communist Party, which came to power in 1949, drew heavily on this historical narrative, using it to legitimize its rule and to justify its focus on national strength and economic development. The CCP's message was clear: weakness invites aggression, and only through strength can China regain its rightful place in the world. This historical experience has shaped China's worldview and its approach to international relations. Trump's tariffs were interpreted by Beijing not merely as an economic challenge, but as a direct challenge to China's sovereignty and its aspirations for national rejuvenation. This perception hardened China's resolve and made it all but impossible for Beijing to back down. In 2018, the Trump administration initiated a trade war with China, imposing tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. The goal was to force China to reduce its trade surplus with the United States, protect American intellectual property, and open up its markets to American companies. Trump believed that China, heavily reliant on exports to the US, would cave under the pressure and concede to his demands. However, China's response was not what Trump had anticipated. Instead of capitulating, China retaliated with its own tariffs on American goods, targeting sectors like agriculture and manufacturing that were politically sensitive for Trump. China also engaged in currency devaluation, making its exports cheaper and offsetting the impact of American tariffs. Recognizing that the dispute was about more than just tariffs, China sought to reduce its dependence on the US market and strengthen its ties with other trading partners. While Trump focused on short-term wins, China played the long game, absorbing the initial shocks and positioning itself for long-term advantage. While Trump's tariffs were intended to punish China, they ended up hurting American businesses and consumers more than they hurt the Chinese economy. American companies that relied on Chinese imports faced higher costs, forcing them to raise prices or absorb losses. Consumers also felt the pinch, as the tariffs led to higher prices for a wide range of goods from electronics to clothing. The agricultural sector was hit particularly hard, as China, once a major buyer of American soybeans and other agricultural products, turned to other suppliers. This led to a glut of unsold crops, depressing prices and forcing many farmers into bankruptcy. The trade war also created uncertainty in the global economy, leading to delays in investment and hiring, further dampening economic growth. China's response to the trade war extended beyond simply matching tariffs. The Chinese government, with its centralized control over the economy, implemented a range of measures to mitigate the negative impacts of the tariffs and to support its domestic industries. One key strategy was to boost domestic consumption. China, traditionally reliant on exports for growth, sought to rebalance its economy by encouraging its citizens to spend more. The government implemented tax cuts, increased social spending, and launched campaigns to promote domestic tourism and consumption. Another key strategy was to support its businesses. the Chinese government provided financial assistance to companies struggling with the impact of the tariffs, including direct subsidies, tax breaks, and easier access to credit. Furthermore, China doubled down on its long-standing strategy of investing in innovation and technological self-sufficiency. The government poured billions of dollars into research and development, particularly in strategic sectors like artificial intelligence, robotics, and renewable energy. The trade war exposed the contrasting approaches of the United States and China in dealing with economic hardship and pursuing long-term goals. The United States, with its emphasis on free markets and limited government intervention, struggled to provide targeted relief to businesses and individuals affected by the tariffs. The agricultural sector, heavily reliant on exports to China, faced significant losses, and the government's response, while substantial, was criticized for being ad hoc and inefficient. China, on the other hand, demonstrated its capacity for swift and decisive action. The Chinese government, with its centralized control over the economy, intervened directly to support businesses, stimulate domestic consumption, and mitigate the impact of the tariffs on its population. The trade war also underscored the differing time horizons of the two countries. The Trump administration, driven by electoral cycles and a desire for quick wins, focused on short-term gains and symbolic victories. China adopted a long-term perspective, viewing the trade war as a temporary obstacle on its path to becoming a global economic superpower. The trade war, despite its negative consequences for both countries, inadvertently accelerated China's rise as a technological powerhouse. Facing pressure from U.S. tariffs and technology restrictions, China redoubled its efforts to achieve technological self-sufficiency, pouring billions of dollars into research and development in key sectors like artificial intelligence, 5G telecommunications, and electric vehicles. Chinese tech giants like Huawei, Alibaba, and Tencent have emerged as global leaders in their respective fields, challenging the dominance of their American counterparts. China is now home to some of the world's most innovative companies and is rapidly becoming a global center for technological advancement. China's technological rise is not merely about economic competitiveness, it has profound geopolitical implications. As China becomes a leader in cutting-edge technologies, its influence on global norms and standards is likely to grow. This could lead to a future where China, not the United States, sets the rules of the game in critical areas like artificial intelligence, data governance, and cybersecurity. China's Belt and Road Initiative, a massive infrastructure project spanning Asia, Africa, and Europe, is just one example of how China is using its economic and technological clout to reshape the global landscape. The trade war, coupled with broader geopolitical shifts, has raised questions about the long-term dominance of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. For decades, the dollar has reigned supreme, underpinning global trade and finance. However, the weaponization of the dollar through sanctions and the increasing use of it as a tool of American foreign policy have led some countries to seek alternatives. China, with its growing economic clout and its ambition to internationalize its currency, the yuan, is well positioned to challenge the dollar's hegemony. China has been actively promoting the use of the yuan in international trade and investment, and it has established currency swap lines with a growing number of countries. The global financial system is moving towards a multipolar order, with the yuan, the euro, and other currencies playing a more prominent role. The rise of alternative payment systems such as China's UnionPay and Russia's Mir further challenges the dominance of the US-led financial system. In conclusion, Donald Trump's tariffs on China were a misguided strategy that ultimately failed to achieve their intended objectives. The tariffs, rooted in a flawed understanding of China's history, resilience, and long-term strategic goals, had unintended consequences for the U.S. economy, hurting American businesses and consumers while doing little to curb China's rise. The trade war, rather than containing China, may have inadvertently accelerated its ascent to global power. Facing pressure from U.S. tariffs and technology restrictions, China doubled down on its efforts to achieve technological self-sufficiency and reduce its reliance on the U.S. market. This, coupled with China's growing economic might and its strategic investments in infrastructure and global partnerships, suggests that China is well positioned to emerge as the world's leading economic and technological power in the 21st century. The failure of Trump's tariffs underscores the need for a more nuanced and realistic approach to US-China relations. Engaging in a new Cold War with China is not in the interests of either country or the world. Instead, the United States needs to find ways to cooperate with China on shared challenges, while also competing vigorously in areas of strategic importance.